What's up, everybody? Brothers, sisters, psychonauts, and seekers of truth. It is Ananka, and welcome to my bazaar. Today, I have a DiPT / Salvia divinorum trip report for you. The title of this trip report is Not Unlike a Velvety, Saucy French Dish, and was submitted to Earwid in 2006 by the user Acrimonious Funk. With all that being said, let our story begin. Dosage time, 12:30 p.m. No other meds or supplements. Today, I'm walking around my office with an extra spring in my step. Unbeknownst to my rigidly constructed employees, this is a direct result of my first experience yesterday with DiPT. Despite an excellent mental set and a comfortable setting, I'm always a bit nervous my first time with any substance. I mean, even though my sample came from a reputable supplier, who really knows what is in the package? I certainly don't have the resources to get an independent evaluation, no matter how prudent such a step might be. I suppose my risk tolerance or naive confidence outstrips my inclination to hire an independent lab. So, once again, I threw caution to the wind and set about my day by weighing out a relatively conservative 26 milligram dose of the white, flour-like substance on my precision scale. My faithful girlfriend sat nearby, reading aloud various DiPT experience reports, which is my preferred method of preparation for a new experience. The few available reports were as varied in nature as the dosages administered. But one thing seemed clear. A 25 milligram dose was less than likely to present any significant problems. And who better than I to add to the public pool of knowledge by subjecting myself once again to this noble pursuit? Taking a psychedelic is rarely a fun venture for me. In the naive days of my youth, I could take a hit of acid or a few grams of mushrooms and go to a party and laugh my ass off. Since getting into them primarily as a personal study, rather than an attempt at escape or entertainment, I have become more acutely aware of the difficulties they present both psychologically and physiologically. Rarely do I have a trip that doesn't come with a certain amount of discomfort, and body load is something of a routine for me, phenethylamines and tryptamines alike. DiPT was no different. The first 2 or 3 hours, I had the usual body shakes, the irritability, the aching joints and raw feeling throughout my belly and intestines. And as I sallied around my apartment, determined to pretend that I wasn't uncomfortable, I found myself once again asking the question, why the hell do I do this to myself? In a roundabout response to my question, I took 0.5 milligrams of alprazolam in 2.25 sublingual milligram doses to help calm the negative effects. So, although I was feeling sick, and that is a relevant point to be made in any experience report, I wanted to get that out of the way first, because it was not a dominating characteristic of the experience, and is almost completely subsided by the 3-hour mark. The rest of the trip is the focus of this report, and my overall experience was nothing short of outstanding. I took a shower within a half hour of dosing, and noticed the first alerts come on as the water rushed over me. A slight lightheadedness and speedy stimulation were present. Returning to the living room, I had an all-over body flush, as if I were coming up on MDMA, no doubt initiated partly by the shower. The leaves on the trees outside were blowing in the wind, and they appeared to be moving as if slightly sped up on fast motion film. The effect was subtle, and otherwise my vision was normal. At T plus 45 minutes, I checked in with my girlfriend, who was making some lunch in the kitchen, and I was both surprised and delighted to hear my voice had attained a distinct lowering in pitch. She responded with a similar effect on her voice, as if she might have grown taller and broader, and I was conversing with an Amazonian woman. I digress for a moment to say that apart from the sickness, both physical and psychological changes were minimal throughout the duration of the experience, although there were subtle visuals. While sitting on the toilet gazing at the floor tiles, the speckled surface was swirling not unlike a low dose of mushrooms, but the effect was only noticeable while staring. I felt slightly confused at times, as I can from smoking weed, but all in all I felt quite normal. I was able to assist a neighbor in loading a large TV into his car without incident. Both physically and emotionally, and conversation was both easy and comfortable, albeit strange sounding. I feel I could have driven an automobile, but as stated in Shulgin's glossary of terms, that would have defined me as an idiot. So I prudently deferred that task to my girlfriend. The oral distortions were thoroughly fascinating. I am an amateur musician, and music has always been a focal point in my life. So I took great pleasure in sitting back and analyzing my condition. Lower tones were distinctly embellished, sounding warmer, fuller, and layered with harmonic tones, while higher tones seemed to be relatively unaffected. If you have ever heard an electric instrument, such as a guitar played through an octaver, that was almost precisely the effect. The primary tone was intact, but there were several lower harmonic and melodic tones resonating at the same time, giving sounds a slightly reverberated quality, as if played with an echo device set at a very short delay time. Somewhat metallic, yet soft and whispery as well. If the sound were a piece of poached salmon, then DiPT was a covering of rich, French, tarragon cream sauce. It was quite beautiful. My observations were primarily undertaken around two pieces of music: Jack Johnson's On and On, and Brian Eno's Ambient 4, On Land. Jack Johnson sounded absolutely beautiful, albeit the usual Jack was gone, and he was replaced by a very large, probably obese, soft-spoken black blues singer. The older James Cotton came to mind, slumped on his stool, grasping his harp between his palms. But Fat Albert from the old 70s Saturday morning cartoon also danced through my head, dribbling his basketball in all of his former glory. Listening to Eno's ambient work, which is beautifully strange and unusual even in the soberest of dreams, the effects were less obvious, yet sounds were similarly warmer, more full, more luxuriant. After a time, I decided to test out the DiPT/Salvia combo. I'll keep this short because the results were unremarkable. Salvia often has profound effects on my oral sense. Sound loses all meaning, as it becomes a landscape rather than a sense, a dimensional shape rather than a vibration. I took several massive, ego-dissolving blasts of salvia over the course of an hour, going in and out of the peak experience 4 times, and I was unable to detect any measurable differences in effects. My feeling is that the salvia experience is so powerful in itself that the subtle effects of DiPT are all but lost in the void. After shaking off the effects of the salvia and returning to my sound-shifted but relatively normal world, we spent the last hours of the afternoon with some friends over for dinner. I was able to function and socialize perfectly well, and had fun continuing my observations while satisfying a voracious appetite with a dinner of free-range chicken and garlic mashed potatoes. Our hostess's voice, which is rather high and sometimes shrill during moments of zealous conversation, seemed mostly unaffected in my altered state. In contrast, her husband, who has a deep, resonating voice, sounded like ED-209, the huge machine gun-toting, law enforcement droid in the movie RoboCop. I also noticed that if I spoke quietly, my own voice sounded very deep and science fiction-like. But if I raised my voice, not in pitch but in volume, the effect was less noticeable. I suspect that as I raised my volume, higher frequencies are more dominant, and changes are therefore less obvious. The magnitude of this audio effect had slowly increased, peaking subjectively around the 2.5-hour mark. It remained quite constant for about 4 hours, then very, very slowly tailed off from there. It was much milder, but still pronounced when I went to bed at 9:30 p.m., a full 9 hours after ingestion. This morning it was barely noticeable, but noticeable nonetheless at about 7:30 a.m. It is now lunchtime, and I am surely baseline. There was no uncomfortable come-down, or the usual cracked-out feeling I have after most trips. And I slept like a baby all night, awaking refreshed and more than a little excited about what I had experienced. I am chomping at the bit to do this again, and I will up my dose to 35 milligrams, I think, next time. Maybe 40. DiPT just might be the ultimate dream drug for the musician or the sound nut. Some might only find it mildly amusing, but I'm really into music and sound, so I found it absolutely astonishing and delightful. It is an oral toy box of ear-tickling proportions. As I said, during the come-up I asked myself the question, why the hell do I do this to myself? A day later, I can answer that question with the same answer I always arrive at. Because psychedelics remind me of how transient and ethereal this reality is. At any moment, we are only a raindrop away from death, and the things we think to be absolute are really nothing more than figments of our imagination. Each time I return to Earth, I feel profoundly thankful for the world I live in, for the life I have, and for the 5 senses I have been gifted with. Psychedelics remind me never to forget these things. Call it what you want. I find God in various powders and plants. Today, once again, I feel much more grounded, and I know I will venture forth to leave this ground for higher consciousness again and again and again. Be safe. All right, everybody. That is the end of our story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Share with us your DiPT experiences down in the comments. Check out the other playlists on my channel, and I will see you in the next one, fam. Deuces.